Many thanks for joining us. It's Politics HQ. Now, these are the stories that made our headlines. Let's start by telling you that civil servants in Rivers State, backed by the Rivers State Solidarity for Good Governance, have issued an ultimatum to the State House of Assembly, demanding the immediate receipt of the 2025 budget from the executive by March 19th. At a media briefing in Port Harcourt, the group led by Opu Oyibo Lily West condemned the Assembly's delay, warning it threatens salaries, contracts, and economic stability. They vowed to stage mass protest if the budget is not received on time, declaring their demand as non-negotiable. Well, at this point, we would, of course, cut to a live feed right now where President Bola Tinubu is addressing the nation on the situation in Rivers State. Stay with us.
Fellow Nigerians, I feel greatly disturbed at the tone we have come to regarding the political crisis in Rivers State. Like many of you, I have watched with concern the development with hope that the parties involved will allow good sense to prevail at the soonest. But all that hope borne out without any solution to the crisis. With the crisis persisting, there's no way democratic governance, which we all fought and worked for over the years, can thrive in a way that will redound to the benefit of the good people of the state. The state has been at a standstill since the crisis started, with the good people of the state not being able to have access to the dividend of democracy. Also, it is public knowledge that the governor of Rivers State, for unjustifiable reasons, demolished the House of Assembly of the state as far back as 13th December 2023, and as up till now, 14 months after, now rebuilt the same. I have made personal interventions between the contending parties for a peaceful resolution of this crisis, but my efforts have been largely ignored by the parties to the crisis. I'm also aware that many well-meaning Nigerians, leaders of thought, and patriotic groups have also intervened at various times with the best of intentions to resolve the matter. But all the efforts were also to no avail. Still, I thank them. On February 28, 2025, the Supreme Court, in a judgment in respect all about 8 consolidated appeals concerning the political crisis in Rivers State, based on several grave unconstitutional acts and the disregard of the rule of law that has been committed by the governor of Rivers State, as shown by the evidence before it, pronounced in very clear terms. And I quote, "A government cannot be said to exist without one of the 3 arms that make up of the government of a state under the 1999 Constitution as amended. In this case, the head of the executive arm of the government has chosen to collapse the legislature to enable him to govern without the legislature as a despot. As it is, there is no government in Rivers State, and I quote. The above pronouncement came after a catalog of judicial findings of constitutional breaches against Governor Siminalayi Fubara. Going forward in their judgment, and having found and held that 27 members of the House who had allegedly deflected, and I quote, are still valid members of Rivers State House of Assembly and cannot be prevented from participating in proceedings of that House by the 8th respondent, that is the governor, in cohort with 4 members, and unquote. The Supreme Court then made some orders to restore the state to immediate constitutional democracy. These orders include the immediate passing of an appropriation bill by the Rivers State House of Assembly, which up to now has not been facilitated. Some militants had threatened fire and brimstone against their perceived enemies of the governor, who has up to now not disowned them. Apart from that, both the House and the governor have not been able to work together. Both of them do not realize that they are in office to work together for the peace and good governance of the state. The latest security report made available to me show that between yesterday and today, there have been disturbing incidents of vandalization of pipelines by some militants without governor taking any action to curtail them. I have, of course, given stand order to the security agencies to ensure safety of lives of good people of Rivers State and the oil pipelines. With all this and many more, no good and responsible president will stand by and allow the grave situation to continue without taking remedial steps prescribed by the Constitution to address the situation in the state, which no doubt requires extraordinary measures to restore good governance, peace, order, and security. In these circumstances, having soberly reflected on and evaluated the political situation in Rivers State, and the governor and deputy governor of Rivers State, having failed to make a request to me as president to issue this proclamation as required by Section 305, Paragraph 5 of the 1999 Constitution as amended, it has become inevitably compelling for me to invoke the provision of the Section 305 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, 1999, as amended, to declare a state of emergency in Rivers State with effect from today, 18th March, year 2025, and I so do. By this declaration, the governor of Rivers State, Mr. Siminalayi Fubara, his deputy, Mrs. Ngozi Odu, and all elected members of the House of Assembly state are hereby suspended for an initial period of 6 months. In the meantime, I hereby nominate Vice Admiral Bekee, Ibas retired, as administrator to take charge of the affairs of the state and the interests of the good people of Rivers State. For the avoidance of doubt, this declaration does not affect the judicial arm of Rivers State, which shall continue to function in accordance with their constitutional mandate. The administrator will not make any new laws. He will, however, be free to formulate regulations and may be found necessary to do his job, but such regulations will need to be considered and approved by the Federal Executive Council and promoted by the President for the state. This declaration has been published in the Federal Gazette, a copy of which has been forwarded to the National Assembly in accordance with the Constitution. It is my fervent hope that this inevitable intervention will help to restore peace and order in Rivers State by awakening all the contenders to the constitutional imperatives, binding on all political players in the River State in particular and Nigeria as a whole. Long live a united, peaceful, secured, and democratic River State in particular, and the Federal Republic of Nigeria as a whole. God bless you all for listening. Thank you.
You just watched President Bola Tinubu just a few moments ago declare a state of emergency in Rivers State. According to the president, he said efforts to mediate the lingering political tension in the state, even by himself personally, hasn't yielded fruit. And for that reason, he declared Section 305 of the 1999 Constitution, which empowers the president to declare a state of emergency. And for that reason, for the next 6 months, according to the president, the state would not be governed by the governor, but by an appointed administrator by the president. So as of now, the breaking news is that President Bola Tinubu has declared a state of emergency in Rivers State. Well, this, of course, is the story, or the biggest story right now in the country. But let's tell you that on the program, the Federal Capital Territory Administration has revoked the land occupancy rights of the People's Democratic Party National Secretariat in Abuja of unpaid ground rent. In a letter dated March 13th, the FCTA's Director of Land Administration, Chidi Lloyd, cited PDP's failure to pay the required fees from 2006 to 2025, despite multiple warnings. The FCTA has now reclaimed the property. Meanwhile, Wike's aide, Larry Olayinka, confirmed that 4,794 land titles have been revoked due to non-payment, with some defaulters owing for up to 43 years. The PDP is yet to respond. Let's also tell you that tension ran high in Bayelsa State as aggrieved women from Yenezua, Jene, and Okutu communities took to the streets in a dramatic protest against alleged rape, harassment, and destruction of their farmlands by suspected herdsmen. For hours, the protesters barricaded the Melford Okilo Road, disrupting vehicular movement. In a bold display, they set up canopies and chairs on the busy highway, laying out damaged cassava tubers and plants, a stark symbol of their grievances. Now, stranded motorists and commuters were forced to seek alternative routes as the demonstration intensified.
Some people might ask that my point of saying the elders should evacuate the state might bring further questioning. Yes, we came to realize that most of these cows belong to even indigents. And here is my point. If you know that you are an indigent of Bayelsa State and you have cows that are being grazed, that are being herded and led by shepherded by these land herdsmen, you are part of the problem we are facing. And so therefore we call on you to simply evacuate all your cows out of the habitats. And then I call on the state government that gave the permission and the law. Let that law be abolished in Bayelsa State and let the herders evacuate our land.
From this land for over 20-something years. Those people are not allowing our people to make farm. And one cost of Gadina is over 1,000 something, 10,000 something. Please, we need a commissioner of agri to come here, and the secretary of the state, and the agent of security of the state. Even though if it's time of election or campaign, a governor cannot come here for this type of thing. So we need the governor to come here, and the H code and commissioner come here. Thank you.
However, on the show tonight, our focus, Rivers State Assembly moves to impeach Governor Fubara over alleged gross misconduct. And of course, the biggest story right now has to do with the declaration of a state of emergency. So, I mean, the tides obviously have turned. So we'll be looking at that. I'll be speaking, of course, with my guest in the course of the program. Stay with us. Welcome back. It's still Politics HQ on News Central Television, and the biggest story right now in Nigeria is that President Bola Tinubu has declared a state of emergency in Rivers State following the political tension in the state. I mean, at just in the wee hours of yesterday and today, there was attacks on some installation, which of course the president also did acknowledge and said that efforts over the months have been made to mediate as regards the tension, the political tension in the state, but, you know, did not yield any fruit. And according to the president, he had to evoke Section 305 of the 1999 Constitution, which empowers his office to declare state of emergency should the need arise. Now, just to give you, a recap of what just transpired about 15 minutes ago in that speech. Now, President Bola Tinubu declared a state of emergency in Rivers State in a nationwide broadcast just a while ago. He stated that the decision was made after evaluating the political crisis in the state, which has been ongoing due to a power struggle between Governor Fubara and his predecessor, Nyesom Wike. In his speech, the president actually did express concern over the crisis, stating that democratic governance cannot thrive in a state of perpetual conflict. He also mentioned that the state has been at standstill since the crisis started, with the people of Rivers as not having access to the dividends of democracy. The president suspended the governor of the state, that's Governor Fubara, and his deputy for 6 months, as well as all elected members of the House of Assembly of the state. He also nominated Vice Admiral Ibokete Ibas as administrator to take charge of the affairs of the state. The president further emphasized that the declaration of a state of emergency does not affect the judicial arm of Rivers State, which shall continue to function in accordance with the constitutional mandate. I mean, this, of course, is the biggest news right now. The big question on the lips of many is, what would be the implication of this? How would the residents of Rivers State, receive this news? What do we see happen in the coming days, maybe in the coming hours, and how would this also impact on peace in that state? Well, we have someone joining us right now to, of course, discuss this. Is a legal practitioner, Kudus Alalafia. Thank you for joining.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to join you abruptly on this program.
I mean,
thank you very much.
This of course, hit a lot of Nigerians, but for some political observers, they would say they of course, are not surprised. Are you surprised that President Bola Tinubu declared a state of emergency in Rivers State?
Obviously, I am not surprised. Don't forget that just last week Thursday, I was on this program, wherein I stated that governance has broken down in Rivers State. And I said if care is not taken with the way they are going, they would, at the end of the day, resort to anarchy, a state of lawlessness. And the federal government would not have any other choice than to declare a state of emergency. I stated it here emphatically. Just that I'm a bit surprised that not up to a week that I preempted the federal government, they actually did my prophecy.
Now, looking at the content and the context of the speech, the president actually, to a very large extent, said that over time, efforts have been made, even by himself, to sort of mediate peace in the state. But this, of course, did not yield the desired result. And for that reason, he had to evoke Section 305 of the 1999 Constitution. But one would say that, I mean, for a state of emergency to be declared, there must be total breakdown of law and order. Is that the true situation in Rivers?
Well, when we say total breakdown of law and order, I think our people believe it is when there is riots, it is when we have killings, it is when we have violence all around the states. No, that is not the only point when we can say there is total breakdown of law and order. At every point in time where the three arms of government, where they are not working effectively, where they are not working in collaboration, where the authority of one arm is no longer recognized or respected by the other arm of government, it is deemed at that point that law and order has broken down. So it is not until when there is violence. What is being played in Rivers is a pure case of total breakdown of law and order. Thank you very much.
Now, let's also talk about the procedure to this declaration. I mean, aside the president declaring the state of emergency, the National Assembly too, do they have a role to play in this? Must there be approval?
Yes, if you look at the relevant proviso, the president cannot unilaterally, as an executive arm of government in the federal state, at the federal level, of course, cannot unilaterally declare. There are some instances you need to get the nod of the legislative arm of government. But for the sake of, what will I say, for the sake of the necessity at hand, there are times the president can proceed to take an action and thereafter come back to the National Assembly for their ratification. But the major purpose must be that the action of the government of the president is necessitated under the doctrine of necessity. It's necessitated that it is very important at that point for the president to take that action if the president knows or sees or feels that the bureaucratic or the protocol around getting the consent of the National Assembly would hinder the peace and progress of Rivers. He can proceed to take that action, then subsequently revert to the National Assembly for their consent.
Now, I'm still going to stay with you on this, but particularly when it comes to the context of peace. Now, on the lips of many, will this action, bring about peace in Rivers State? From your perspective, what do you see even happening within in the coming hours, particularly for residents of the state?
The first thing is that I think we need to be in Rivers before we can feel like people in Rivers. Also, this particular event will truly test the legitimacy of the government. The legitimacy in the sense that how acceptable he is in his own state. It would be very glaring if the people love their governor. Of course, they would demand for his reinstatement. But if not, the other thing happens. But what we are saying in essence is whether or not there will be peace. Well, for me, I can only but hope that there will be peace, because apparently this particular event favors some people or some party. When I say party, I do not mean political parties in this context. I mean parties to the conflict. And it does not favor the other party. And so the people that, of course, this thing does not go in their favor, you should expect some level of reactions from them. But above all, we hope that the federal government will be able to maintain the peace and security in the state following this particular event. Thank you very much.
Kudus, looking at the speech itself, would you say that that speech was balanced? Because, at several points, the president kept making reference to the governor of the state, that's the current governor of the state, but never said anything about the former governor, who was the present FCT minister. We know that this political crisis, the core of it, for many observers, who might want to liken it to a power struggle between Fubara and Nyesom Wike. But
can I hear you?
Yes, I can hear you. But at several points within that speech, the president kept making reference to Governor Fubara and his deputy, but never said anything about the involvement of the former Governor Nyesom Wike. So would you call that a balanced speech?
Okay, you know, there are official statements and there are unofficial statements. Official statements will have to follow the path of available facts and evidence before the president. And the unofficial means, okay, we know who is actually fueling the so-called crisis, or the person actually behind the camera. But of course, you will see that the states at which the president made that statement was obviously an official statement. And so the president obviously will not be making allusion to somebody who is not in the position of authority. Now, in the position of authority, I mean, of course, the former governor. He is not in the position of authority in Rivers State. So obviously, uneasy lies the head that wears the crown. The governor is the head of the state as well as the deputy. So if, for me, if the president is making statements or making allusions or concurrently mentioning the name of the governor, because it is believed that as the chief security officer of the state, you are expected to maintain and to coordinate your state in the right order. So by that statement, I will not say there is anything wrong with the statement. However, if you are going to look at it beyond the officiality, of course, I believe that the president at one point or the other ought to also now make statements that also at one point or the other is directed to the parties, even if the governor and even if the president will not outrightly mention the name of the Honorable Minister of FCT. But like I said, if you are going to look at the statements being made in an official state, of course, some things are not expected to be infused into an officiating statement. So except we are making political statements, then I expect the president to make allusion or to make some sort of observation towards the FCT minister. But because the manner at which it was released, he released it as the president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, who has the duty to maintain peace and security in all over the federation. Obviously, he wouldn't have mentioned any other person's name other than that person who is at the helms of affairs in that state. Thank you very much.
All right, Kudus, people who would, of course, just watch the speech and observing all of this scenario, with the state of emergency being declared right now and looking at the gladiators involved, who would you say it's a win-win for? Is it for the governor? Is it for the former governor of the state, that's a person of Nyesom Wike, or the current governor, Fubara, or even the president himself? According to some, they'll say ahead of 2027. So who is this a win for?
Thank you very much. For me, this is my personal opinion. It is not a win-win for anybody. It is a slap. It is a total slap on all parties involved in the Riverside. The reason is not far-fetched. If you people could not settle your matter, could not settle your issue in your state, don't forget that we operate federal system of government in Nigeria. Each of the component units that surround the central government are independent. So it is expected that they have a legislature, they have the executive and the judiciary arm. And the three arms could not do anything, only for the federal government to step in. Then it shows their level of, it shows their level of, I don't want to be quoted out of context, but it shows their level of, their love for peace, security, their existence among the committee of states in Nigeria. I am very sure that the issue that happened in Rivers State is not the first issue that will happen in all other states. And as much as I know that this is not the first time the federal government will be declaring state of emergencies, if you look at the last time we had such a thing and now,
okay,
we are talking about maybe early 2000.
Okay.
Not of recent. So for me, it is not a win for any one of them. And like I enjoined every one of them as of last week, I said, let every one of them go back to the drawing table and let them all settle their issues amicably.
Okay, Kudus, I would leave you for a moment. I'd like to bring Oni Olalekon as a public affairs analyst into this conversation. Oni Olalekon, it's great to have you join us on the program this evening. Of course, the big news right now in Nigeria, in Rivers State, is that a state of emergency has been declared. What do you make of President Bola Tinubu's speech just a while ago on Rivers?
Yeah, all right, good evening. Well, for me, it came as a very big surprise that a state of emergency is finally declared in Rivers State as regards the political crisis going on in that state for a while now. I think it's over a year, or let's even say that the crisis started immediately after Governor Fubara, was sworn in between him and his SY godfather, His Excellency Nyesom Wike. And many people, including the president, has come on board to settle this matter, but unfortunately it ended at declaring a state of emergency, which is a huge surprise to many, including me as well. So I believed that this crisis will have been solved or resolved, and a shock, like I said, and it's a surprise that today we have a state of emergency. I felt that something that they could resolve between themselves and all of that, because their leaders and elders in River State. The president has waded in at some point, but today we have a state of emergency.
All right.
It's a surprise to many Nigerians, even to indigenous and residents of River State.
I mean, Olalekon, on the contrary, Kudus said he's not surprised, but you hold a different opinion on that. For you, maybe just like many Nigerians too, you said you are surprised. But let's look at the ripple effect of this particular, declaration by the president, on River State. He quoted Section 305 of the 1999 Constitution as the anchor for, declaring a state of emergency in the state. What do you see happening, in the coming maybe hours?
Well, for me, before the president came out to declare the state of emergency, about 7 p.m. nationwide broadcast, there have been meetings between the president and service chiefs and the NSA as well. So I believe that the president, or let me say the federal government, is ready to take care of whatever happenings that might rise up. People have suggested that there might be uprising in River State, and we saw it in the morning when the pipeline was blown up. And so I strongly believe that the federal government is ready, the president is ready for whatever. When I say whatever, I mean crisis that might want to erupt in River State and all of that. I believe that the security agencies, the army, the police, the NSCDs, and all of them might have been, getting ready. They are alerted to get ready to ensure that.
Olalekon, maybe I should just wade in here. Is this truly in the interest of peace in the state?
Well, what state of emergency actually said, if you read what the reason why or the process of declaring a state of emergency in any state of the federation, or even in the federation itself, in the country itself, what it said was that if you have maybe an out-of crisis in a state or in a particular area or whatever, the president has the right, to declare a state of emergency. So, and what that state of emergency infers, to my own understanding and interpretation, is that to maintain peace and order. Don't forget that now that we have a state of emergency in River State, what will happen is that the security agencies across board, the army, the police, will ensure that peace is maintained in River State. And going forward, I believe that's exactly what will happen.
All right, let me come back to Kudus. Kudus, in all of it, even though we know that from what the president said, he said the executive, which of course the governor is affected, the legislative arm, but he said the judiciary, is not captured in this declaration. So what role right now, will the judiciary play in the state?
Can I get your question again, please?
I'm asking that now that we know that the judiciary is not captured in this declaration, how do they function?
Of course, the judiciary is, as we usually say it, they are independent. Each of the arm of government is independent to the other. They can, of course, function ultimately independently without other arms. Notwithstanding, that does not mean there will not be someone at the helm of affairs. Of course, the president, having declared a state of emergency, will have to appoint a sole administrator who will now, for the next 6 months, see into the affairs and carry on the function of the suspended parties. So it is not that the judiciary needs the approval or the approval of the legislature or executive for majority of their functions, except where there is an issue of appointment of the CJ, which needs the recommendation of the NJC to be appointed by the governor and confirmed by the House of Assembly. And even in such a situation, the NJC can still appoint somebody to be acting in the acting capacity, pending the time the two arms of government get themselves together. So for me, I do not see anything hindering the functionality of the judiciary in Rivers State.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Let me bring into the conversation right now. Bedford Berefa is actually the spokesperson for the Ijaw Youth Council Worldwide. I understand that we, of course, are trying to connect with him, but once we are able to, we will definitely bring him on. I'm still going to stay with you on this, Kudus. Let's also x-ray this particular declaration by Mr. President as it affects some lingering issues which has to do with allocation, for instance. How does this impact, if at all, on administration, of the state? Kudus, did you get me?
Sorry, I think my network was unstable. What did you say?
Okay, so I was asking the impact of this on administration, in the state, particularly when it comes to the issue of allocation and the day-to-day workings of civil servants, for instance. How does this affect them?
It obviously affects them greatly. In fact, they are the first victim of this state of emergency. Don't forget that the Supreme Court had already directed the federal government not to release the allocation of Rivers State, not until when the governor presents the budgets in the proper way to the House of Assembly. So that one is still on. There's still a lien on their account as we speak. Then I'm also not sure that the federal government will now proceed to release the allocation of Rivers State to a sole administrator. I do not think so. I do not think so. However, I believe that the sole administrator will have to work with the civil servants in Rivers State, who will now be the ones at the helms of affairs. Yes, in this in government or in political science, they call it the civil service rule. When the civil servant, when they are the one at the helms of affairs. So I still believe that yes, because they now have a direct access to make decision without making a decision through political actors like the commissioners, like the governor, I believe that they will set the record straight in making sure that by the time these people are coming back, or by the time another representative is coming on board, they will meet an efficient civil service that will also lead them in the right manner. Because I believe that for politicians to come into power and turn things around, they also need the help of civil servants. So if civil servants get themselves together and hold themselves as one, I believe with this state of emergency and the new people or the present people still coming on board, I believe everybody will have to sit tight. But to your question, they are the first victim, and I do not think the president or the federal government will release the allocation to a sole administrator. Thank you very much.
All right. Let me, of course, because we're really pressed for time and we are trying to, of course, manage it, I would like to come to you, Oniola Lekon. Looking at what we saw and the president's speech, do you think that aside declaring a state of emergency, there could have been other avenues at which the president could maybe resolve or intervene in the issue in Rivers State? You know, it sounded in that speech like he had exhausted all the options. Even though some individuals who watched that speech might say it seemed to even be more when it comes to talking on the part of Fubara, you know, more saying that, you know, suggesting that maybe Governor Fubara, you know, was more at fault, without even making mention of his predecessor, who is also a major gladiator in this crisis, in person of Governor Wike, former Governor Wike. So my question to you is this: could there have been, you know, another, you know, avenue to resolving this issue aside declaring a state of emergency in Rivers?
Apart from dialogue, which the president also exhausted, and, you know, calling all warring factions into a meeting, I don't think that there was a meeting where this issue was discussed like 2 weeks ago, where leaders and elders from Rivers State came to know the president, maybe on another matter, but I think that matter was also tabled at that meeting. Like the president said, he has exhausted all means to ensure that there is settlement, you know, a political settlement. Don't forget, there was a meeting last year where resolutions were made, where the governor was supposed to go back to Rivers State and, you know, act on that resolution. But unfortunately, the governor had to, you know, continue using 4 members or 3 members out of almost 80-something members, you know, of the House of Assembly. So I believe that the president has exhausted all means, and then at the end of the day, I strongly believe that if this state of emergency had not been declared today, you know, oil pipelines will be blown. We saw what happened in the morning today. Let me react to the question you asked Mr. Kubezi at that time, asking that if this state of emergency will actually affect civil servants. I don't believe that it will affect civil servants in any way. And I also want to believe that the ban on the Rivers State allocation will be lifted, because Fubara is not the governor at the moment. We now have, you know, a sole administrator who will need money, you know, for governance and all of that. So I strongly believe that the ban on the federation account, on the federal allocation to Rivers State will be lifted so that governance can go on. Don't forget that what the Supreme Court said had to do with Fubara and not the sole administrator. And also, don't let us forget that even civil servants are the major people who does the work. Commissioners and all of these people, they are just political appointees. Civil servants are the one doing the job in any government, and any administration. So I strongly believe that this state of emergency will not in any way affect the administration, you know, either allocation or whatever, or governance in Rivers State.
My final question to you would be, I mean, for many observers, could this signal the beginning of the end of Governor Fubara's political journey in Rivers?
Well, I don't believe it will be the end of the story. I strongly believe that before the end of these 6 months, there will be a political solution to the crisis, which I also believe that Governor Fubara will also accept and be ready to work on the political solutions. Don't forget, I said it from the beginning of this fight. I said that the solution to this fight, this crisis, the political crisis, will definitely be a political solution. And when the president called, you know, that meeting last year, all the resolutions you saw was a political solution. But, you know, the actors were not ready to toe that path. In fact, one of the elders from Rivers State took the president to court. Or something, I can't remember his name especially now. They took the president to court, saying that everything the president said were to favor Nyesom Wike. And we have seen how it is that at the end of the day, it will be a political solution. And I believe that before the lapse of this, you know, 6 months of state of emergency, all of this will be put in place. And I don't see this state of emergency being the end of Fubara. I strongly want to believe that.
All right, gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time. Kudus Alalafia, legal practitioner, and also Oni Olalekon, a public affairs analyst. Gentlemen, once again, thank you for your time.
Yes.
All right. It's been a great one today on the show. Just to bring you up to speed with the recent happenings in Rivers, just a while ago, President Bola Tinubu actually did declare a state of emergency in Rivers, as provided in Section 305 of the 1999 Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Let's take a listen to part of that speech.
In these circumstances, having soberly reflected on and evaluated the political situation in Rivers State, and the governor and deputy governor of Rivers State having failed to make a request to me as president to issue this proclamation as required by Section 305, Paragraph 5 of the 1999 Constitution as amended, it has become inevitably compelling for me to invoke the provision of the Section 305 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, 1999, as amended, to declare a state of emergency in Rivers State with effect from today, 18th March, year 2025, and I so do. By this declaration, the governor of Rivers State, Mr. Siminalayi Fubara, his deputy, Mrs. Ngozi Odu, and all elected members of the House of Assembly State are hereby suspended for an initial period of 6 months. In the meantime, I hereby nominate Vice Admiral Bekee, Ibas retired, as administrator to take charge of the affairs of the state in the interest of the good people of Rivers State. For the avoidance of doubt, this declaration does not affect the judicial arm of Rivers State, which shall continue to function in accordance with their constitutional mandate. The administrator will not make any new laws. He will, however, be free to formulate regulations and may be found necessary to do his job, but such regulations will need to be considered and approved by the Federal Executive Council and promoted by the President for the state.
Well, there you have it. The state of emergency there declared in Rivers State by President Bola Tinubu. The big question on the lips of many is what will be the implication of this on the political landscape of Rivers in the coming weeks, days, or even minutes? Well, that's a wrap on today's show. Until I come your way tomorrow, good night.